Welcome to the Tactical Cyber Podcast, where we transform strategic cyber insights into actionable tactics for everyday implementation. Join your hosts, retired FBI Supervisory Special Agent Darren Mott and Risk Advisory Practice Leader at Warren Averett, Paul Perry. Together, they bring decades of experience from the front lines of cybersecurity and risk management to help business owners and individuals take the actions that will keep their business and personal digital data safe. Each episode, we delve into the world of cybersecurity, sharing real-world experiences, expert interviews, and practical tips to safeguard your digital landscape. It's time to move past cyber strategies and start working cyber tactics.
Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Tactical Cyber Podcast. I am one of your hosts, retired FBI Supervisory Special Agent Darren Mott, and this is part 2 of our recent foray into the Southeast Cyber Summit in Birmingham a couple weeks ago. Paul and I were down there at the Warren Averett booth, and I thank Warren Averett for allowing us to commandeer their booth for this event. And we have 2 interviews today. One is the keynote speaker for the entire event, retired FBI Special Agent, my very good friend, Scott Augenbaum. He talks about the things that he talks about. And it's always good to hear Scott's perspective on the cybersecurity world, how to protect people and keeping people safe, because that's really his thing. And our other interview is with a gentleman from Crowdstrike, Dmitri Krill, and his is pretty fascinating as far as his perspective on cybersecurity, kind of what Crowdstrike's doing and some of the questions that we tend to ask. And I think I asked them both. I think I asked everybody at this conference, like, what are we accomplishing here with conferences? And I think those of you who have heard me before know where I come down on cyber conferences. I understand the rationale behind them, that it's a lot of people getting together and trying to explain what it is that they do to find clients and things like that. But my problem is, do we even accomplish anything? I'm working with a friend of mine who's on the National Cyber Summit here in Huntsville. It's coming up in September, to see if there's a way we can make it more meaningful. And so hopefully the Cyber Guy podcast, or maybe the Tactical Cyber Podcast, will be out there for that conference as well, but that's later in the year, so no need to spend time on that. I'm not going to talk a lot here at the beginning of this particular podcast. I'm just going to get right into the interviews, but look for the next episode of Tactical Cyber to come at you in the next week or so as we look for some more guests, and we will go back to live streaming and doing all of those things. So as always, I thank you for taking the time to listen. I hope you enjoy these interviews with Scott Augenbaum and Dmitri Krill.
All right, well, we've got our guest here. Scott Augenbaum just came off the stage of doing the keynote presentation here at Southeast Cybersecurity Summit. Good conversation, good discussions. One of the things my takeaway from that was change your mindset, change your behavior. Talk about, as it relates to the cybers, talk about why you want to change people's mindsets and change their behaviors. Why is that needed?
I just want to know why Darren wasn't there at my presentation today.
I tried to bring him.
I've heard it 7 times.
Only 7?
Yeah, only.
I mean, I had this great plug for you, Darren. I was talking about, listen, if, I talked about my book, and I said, if you're looking to read a good book by an FBI agent who saved the day and who is really technical and knows about cyber, they should get your book. And that's why I wanted him to today.
And then he didn't bring any.
I know, that's good.
I can tell you right where they're sitting in my garage, though.
Hey, good time today, but not shocking. It's like every time I'm here at an information security conference, everyone's talking about enterprise, everyone's talking about risk management, risk threshold, and I ask a couple of questions like, hey, did you freeze your credit? How many people, what percentage froze
it was less than 2%.
Less than 2% was 2-factor authentication on your home router.
That's right.
2-factor authentication on your on your cell phone provider and on your iPhone. And then people go, why am I talking about the same thing every day? I'm like, I can only go through my life. I can talk about the same 6 things. And every time I go to a conference, I'm like, man, I know this is too simple. But listen, it's still the same thing all the time.
And it never changes. And I think one of the things we talked about earlier was, what are we here to try and fix? And how do we fix this? How do we fix the risk of cyber in society? Forget about business, but in society. And I don't think there is an answer. Would you agree with that?
It's the same response. Again, I gave everyone today after. It's part of my test. I scare them. I tell them, here's your risk assessment. Do these things at home. Here's a list of things. Here's 2 chapters in my book about keeping your kids safe. And I got about 30 people today.
A room of 600, only 30 wanted what you had to.
And the low percentage. So we can't say that it wasn't that my talk was so basic and so elementary that it didn't apply because nobody raised their hands. So to me, I'm like, okay, I had a great time today. Met a lot of good people. I mean, to me, it was a complete success.
Right.
But that's all these conferences are. Let's go meet people, probably the same people we've seen 75 times before, but nothing like the one in Huntsville. Like whatever gets solved out of that. That's been my biggest complaint. And this is a smaller one than the one in Huntsville, right? It's bigger than it has been in the past, but still, this is not a huge. I mean, in the conferences you've been to, where does this stand size-wise?
No, this was a pretty big conference. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm talking, at a lot of companies and at a lot of associations. This was a fairly large conference. I mean, with 600 people. I mean, but at the end of the day, what are we trying to solve? Like you said it best. And, I feel for everyone over here who's also at the same time trying to make a living, convincing people that they need to take precautions.
Right. It's just never going to end, right?
Not now. Not in our lifetime.
Not in my lifetime.
No,
but there's booths here that say stop cyber criminals, that end cyber risk. Aren't they solving the problem?
Yeah, they're making a living. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, look, you do need. I'm not saying that you don't. I mean, look, you need products. You need things. You just can't read my book. You can't listen to your podcast. There are products and services that you need to get. But if you don't take the time, just like with the question, the guy at the end said, people think with cyber liability insurance, they got things covered. And I'm like, you can outsource risk, but you can't outsource responsibility.
Yeah. That's not going to, and you're just going to keep spending money over and over and over on it. And I think you talk about that, right? Like, there's no plateau for spending around cyber.
Well, listen, I've made a living going to conferences. I've made a living in not giving more than an hour talk.
Right.
Because nobody wants more than an hour talk. I could go over at different associations and conferences and I can say, and I love this is great, but I'll go do a training for a company. Here's a great example. They pay me money. They say, look, we're only giving you 30 minutes. I'm like, well, I feel bad. I feel guilty. I mean, come on. So I offer to them that I'll do a webinar on how to be a better digital parent because sextortion is out of control.
Right.
And they look at me like, dude, you're creating way too much work. That's not what we need to do. And the cyber liability insurance carriers only need the 30 minutes worth of training. And for anyone who wants to spend a lot of money and wants a 30-minute presentation, I'm your guy. I'm your overpriced speaker, so please call me. But that's why my new goal is to keep 1 million people safe over the next 5 years. And how am I going to do that? By dropping content on LinkedIn, by dropping content on YouTube, because
education is the only thing we can do to protect the human error, the behavior. How do you change that?
I wish I know. We can only do our thing, and then Darren and I sound like the two angry guys at the Muppet Show, sitting in the back room.
Me especially, I'm the worst one.
Complaining about, hey, you look at that guy over there. He says he'll prevent all risk.
Yeah, I mean it's frustrating, right? Because we know what to do, but no one wants to do it. Which is why again I come down to what are we solving here, right?
No,
we're meeting. I bet you get to meet a lot of people you haven't seen in a year, and you can
look. I gave away 30 pieces of information today. Okay, that's 30 people that you could help.
Sure, sure. If they read it and if they follow what you say.
I'll give you something that really kind of struck with me today. The gentleman I was talking to before was the former Chief Information Security Officer of Middle Tennessee State University. I've known him for years, and he said to me, he came over, and this made me feel really good. He goes, I remember it was about 10 years ago, one of my good friend's dad was about to get scammed, and I called you, and you immediately called him. And because of what you did, he wasn't scammed. So when I hear stories like that, Darren, it's just
good.
like,
Yep.
I'm like, we got to keep doing what
yeah.
we doing. You know, it's just the way it goes.
And I'm not saying I'm not going to do it. I'm just thinking there's more effective ways to do it than this.
Well, listen, you can go get a job at CrowdStrike. They'd pay a lot of money for a retired FBI agent. Can work with Sean Henry again.
Yeah, that'd be great, yes. I'm hoping the CrowdStrike guy comes over. I want to ask him what happened in December. How'd that go? What's going on there?
I don't think they're going to answer.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah, Darren, don't get thrown out like you did in almost got thrown out in Quantico.
That sounds like a story for another podcast.
But I was already in the bureau. They couldn't do anything other than send me home to go do my job instead of waste my time for 6 weeks.
Oh, Darren was amazing over there. Every once in a while when I think I get out of line about things and say things, I just look at Darren and I'm like, oh.
It's like a contest to see who can get out of line quicker.
It's good. So, Paul, what are you working on now? I like to interview you. What are you guys seeing in the world?
Love it. You know, we're seeing that the things people say they're doing, they're just not doing. Mm-hmm. And it's a resource issue, right? That's the biggest conversation is when we're talking to companies, we don't have the resources to do X, Y, and Z, so we can only do this. But they're not focused on the thing that's going to protect them the most.
Yeah.
Right? I'm going to do the easy thing because I can check a box and say I'm done.
Uh-huh.
So all the companies that, we've seen a lot more companies that we've talked to around assessments and IT reviews, and nobody can get access correct, right? Terminated employees that still have access to the system. Still the number one thing we see on reports.
Yeah, that's amazing because if you have terminated employees, and how many of those accounts are being compromised by criminals and being used to log in? And
they don't know, and that's the whole thing. I think you said it, and I've said it a lot. You can't outsource responsibility, but people will stick their head in the sand. If I don't see it, then it's not happening. So I must be safe, and that's not the case.
And that's not always the CISO's role, because I had a buddy of mine went in, got a job at a big publicly traded company, and it took him about a year to get a list of 1,800 employees whose accounts were not used in 1 year.
Wow.
So if you have 1,800 accounts that haven't been used in a year, how many accounts are being used by cyber criminals that we don't even know about?
And that's just it. You don't if you're not focused on it every single day and you're not looking at it and somebody's not monitoring that report that comes out, it's a problem. So the other things we're doing are just education, and Darren and I talk about this a lot, and I appreciate what you do for the world to try and help educate and hopefully somebody listens. And that's the only thing we can continue to do is education.
That's why I drink a lot these days.
What's your choice?
I've been hitting the brown lately.
Okay.
I was down in. Is Eagle Rare hard here to get?
Yes.
Okay, so
if it's allocated, it's hard in the state.
So I go to this is the important stuff we're going to talk about on the podcast. So I go over, I'm down at Total Wine in Baton Rouge, and I asked them, I said, do you have any Eagle Rare? Because it's $21 a bottle. So the lady comes out with a case of it, and I go, is there an allocation? She goes, no. So I bought the whole entire case. I don't know what I'm going to do with it all.
You could probably sell it in the state for triple or quadruple.
Yes, but I'll just give it so my kids will have it so when I die they can throw it out.
Scott, thanks for...
thank you guys. I appreciate what you guys are doing. Darren, always great to be here in person.
Yes. We didn't hear the Fort Trues, but we'll get to the Fort Trues another time.
We've heard it all the time. Don't make fun and don't judge.
Sorry, my bad.
Okay.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks. Well, we're joined now by Dmitri Krill of Crowdstrike. Dmitri, thanks so much for taking the time to come over and talk to us. This is Paul and Darren. We're on the Tactical Cyber Podcast, is the name of our podcast. And so our point is to talk to people about what are practical solutions to fix the cyber problem, right? Mm-hmm. As opposed to just, hey, here's a strategy. You should try these things. What do we do? So Crowdstrike, obviously a huge name in the cyber world. So tell us a little bit about what you do and how you support Crowdstrike, and maybe why companies should go to Crowdstrike and what they provide for them.
Yeah, sure. So, like I said, I'm sales engineering, right? I cover a list of accounts. I am the technical expert for it. So when customers approach us, or if we're out approaching customers, or like this event here, we'll try to figure out what their problems are, what their needs are, and how we can best fit that with the solutions that we provide at Crowdstrike. So that could be anything from EDR protections, right, your base entry point, all the way to identity, cloud, workloads, things like application security as well. So
when you're having those conversations with folks and you're trying to figure out what they need, what is it that most need? What is the biggest need that you've seen that's the consistent need across companies? Doesn't matter the size, but there's probably 5 or 6 things you're usually talking about. What's the one thing you're always having a discussion on?
Well, one of the things I always hear is like, we need more people, right? We need more bodies constantly. But outside of the kind of those little bit of pains, it's managing the alerts that we have today, especially around things around vulnerabilities, right? That's very hard to track. There's a lot of them. They never stop coming, it seems like. You can clear out your inbox today. Tomorrow there'll be a couple more because mainly it's out of your hands, right? So you're just kind of playing a catch-up game. Outside of that is combining all the relevant logs that they need, right? I mean, we have vendors from, NDR, EDR, identity, other platform players as well. And so really it's like, how do I get the most out of what I'm using? And then are there places that I can reduce cost to also utilize maybe another partnership, right? So we also see that play where customers are wanting to move into a single vendor versus having 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, so
Makes
many
sense.
of them, right?
Because you don't know who's doing what, and sometimes that gets lost in all of the relationships.
Exactly. And then, vendors change, right? You had the acquisition by Google with Wiz, right? And so one day you're thinking, okay, well, I think I have a pretty good partner in this space, and while they may be, then all of a sudden you have Google purchasing them up, and it's like, what is that like, right? Cisco bought Splunk. What's that going to be like, right? And so those are also changes that customers are wary of as well. They're very affected, right? Is my quote going to go up, or my technology going to change, right? Especially with you think about like Linksys when Cisco bought them for a few years and then kicked them to the curb after they stripped them out. So it's those things you have to think about as well.
So I have a question I've wanted to ask someone at Crowdstrike for a while. I wasn't sure exactly where to go and who to bug with it. But so I talk a lot on podcasts with cyber news stuff, and I find a lot of news organizations don't quite get the cyber stuff right? That's why Paul and I talk to the cybers all the time, because the media people don't seem to really be on it very well. They just kind of see words or see potential stories and kind of exploit what it is. So one of the big things I've seen over the last year, what they're calling EDR killers, right? These the ability for the bad guys to get around the EDR protection. How real is that? What are you guys doing to address it? How are you staying ahead of the bad guys who are trying to stay ahead of you?
Gotcha. Well, I mean, they call it EDR killer for a reason, right? So it kind of comes back to the philosophy, at least in my opinion, is anything human made can be human defeated, right? Giving enough time and effort, you can get around pretty much anything. But with that in mind, right, we're learning from what the attackers are doing, right? We always get questions around, oh, well, can you protect me from this 0 day? Can you see this 0 day, right? It's called a 0 day for a reason, right? It's like no one can see it, right? Until we see it. And so that's where the power of the crowd really comes in. So let's say I myself, get exposed, right? I get attacked. I'm now victim number 1, right? Out of a billion different endpoints on the machine, I'm only one person. But if I have Crowdstrike, we see that telemetry, right? We immediately ingest that into what we call our threat graph. Our threat graph then analyzes it. We have engineers on the back end that are threat hunters. They spend all day doing this. They make those rules. They make those behavioral models to be able to identify when that breakout occurs, right? I may not have initial protections for like an EDR killer, but every attacker has to do pretty much the same kill chain, right? To a rough degree. Of course, there's nuance to that, right? Maybe I don't do persistence the way another one does it. Maybe, the North Koreans want to get a job and get a 401k and then, wait 4 years, have the atomic family, then they pounce, right? Whereas some actors want to do a smash and grab, right? Bull in a China shop style. Either way, once they get through the door, we have to then look at those behaviors. And that's where Crowdstrike really starts using that power of the crowd to understand, okay, EDR killer A came out, but guess what? They're going to have to start disabling processes. They're going to have to start dumping LSAS. They're going to have to do something that's going to give away that ability, right? And that's where Crowdstrike can stop it, right? Then once we understand, this is their entryway, we can try to close that gate if it's within our wheelhouse as well, right? So that's how we're kind of approaching that.
So the basis of what Crowdstrike is doing is really more collaboration of seeing what else is out there and then trying to help everybody else with that. Is that an accurate statement? That's
a very accurate statement to the portion of where we're trying to go with those 0 day vulnerabilities, those EDR killers, because like I said, it's very hard to stop everything, but they all have to behave the same way, right? Me and you, I could have a badge on, pretend to be Dmitri coming through the door, but once I'm in, if I'm a threat actor, I'm going to come up to you and say, hey, you guys want to do an interview? I got this podcast. Get information out of me, right?
Yes, exactly.
And so that's where it's like, hey, I recognize that guy. He's the guy from the podcast. No, he's good. Like,
Right.
Who's that guy? Right. And so that's where we really start looking at the behaviors. But in addition to that, we also have the intel side of the house, right? So we have adversaries that, on these breach forums, right, popular places to dump LSS to collaborate, Telegram, right, all the top stuff. We have people in those spaces as well to be like, hey, what's going on, right? I think one of the big ones on breach forum was one of the most prominent people up there was an FBI actor. Right, he was an undercover FBI agent that came through, right? So the same way that the FBI is doing it, we're kind of doing the same way. We're trying to understand, well, who's your next target? What are you guys doing, right? What are you hearing from the dark web in order to understand, what attackers are doing? But that all feeds back into the platform to give you that protection. We correlate all that with your detections as well. And of course, we do other portions of the platform in the stack, like identity, DSPM, all that kind of stuff.
So, what did you do before Crowdstrike?
I was Cisco Systems, actually, not the food one, but
we got you.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. No, sorry for the dad joke there, but
fine.
Yeah, I got that one a lot coming up through. But yeah, I did Cisco. I was TAC for roughly 7 years. Internship in what they called Kalo, which is their advanced laboratory. It was about $4 billion worth of gear, from everything from Soho routers to ISP devices. I set up for TAC engineers to do recreates, moved into actually managing that lab, and then eventually into TAC itself on the floor, working with like firepower, ASAs, that kind of stuff, and for endpoints. And that's how I kind of found my love for endpoints and moved into Crowdstrike here.
So obviously everybody probably, I haven't seen your booth, but I'm sure the two letters AI and ML are there somewhere. I guess it's 4 letters. But so how are you incorporating those two things into what it is that you all do? Is it making it easier, making it harder?
So we had ML and behavioral analysis and AI to a degree before it came out to be kind of this like front-facing ChatGPT kind of thing. That's how we did a lot of the analysis of attackers, replications, right, user, agionic kind of things. But now what we're moving more towards is that kind of chat bot feel. So we have Charlotte AI, which is built into our platform now. That has access within all the modules that you subscribe to. And you're able to actually go and ask Charlotte, hey, what are my most riskiest users? What are my most critical vulnerabilities? Do I have internet exposure on my critical assets, right? And using the data that you have within the platform, right, of course, going in and tending that field and making sure all your data is up to date automatically via rules or whatever, you can then use AI to help you understand, well, what are my biggest risks? What are my lowest hanging fruit to solve? What are my most difficult things to solve, right? And so that's how we're kind of incorporating it at a front-facing ChatGPT. But like I said, we already had AI in the back end to a degree, doing a lot of our analysis, helping our engineers understand reverse engineering code and those types of things.
What is, if I can ask this question, what does the future of CrowdStrike look like? What's out there that is coming that you can talk about? I don't want to get you in trouble, but just in thinking of where we're trying to head with solving cybersecurity to some degree, what's on the horizon for CrowdStrike?
So we made a couple acquisitions in the last, I believe this month, or not this month, but the last couple of months here. We had Bionic, which was our ASPM, right, for application security, posture management, where we can take a look and see, hey, here are all of your open holes, here are your API calls, where the vulnerabilities. We have Falcon Shield, which is our SaaS-based, another PM one, right? Take a look at your configurations. Are they up to date? But my opinion of where we're going is that unified platform, really. Next-Gen SIEM has been a huge, huge play for us to bring in third-party logs, to start doing correlation, applying our AI and behavioral analysis to those to help surface certain types of attack patterns, behavioral anomalies, and then tying that into our own platform as well. So my future is that it's going to be that, when they said XDR when it first came out, right, extended detection and response, I think that's what we're going to end up at. Okay. But as a more holistic viewpoint. I really think that you need to find a partner in the space, go all in, and then that way you have that XDR field. Because you got to, if I'm CrowdStrike, is Palo Alto going to play nice with me in my logs for how long? If I'm Cisco, right? And so I think eventually we're going to be at the point where it's going to be one partner, you're going to have all your stuff there, and then you're going to have the AI, the machine learning, all the telemetry, and start doing that real XDR style detections.
So what are we solving here? So in this conference, I see we go to a lot of conferences, right?
Yeah.
So what are we solving at these conferences, right? See, this has been I've been to a lot of conferences, 25 years in 20 in the FBI, 5 in cybersecurity, been to a lot of conferences, and I come away from most of them thinking, what did we solve there? What did we fix? How do we fix the conference environment to make it more tactically focused, where people can leave and say, I can take that I learned from that person. I can make things work for me now that I didn't think about before. I assume that's what you guys are trying to do, right? Have you seen success with that? Like, have you gone to these conferences and ended up with, like, you know, you have a tangible result? You said this was worth us going, as opposed to just, I got to see the same 4 guys I saw for the booth next to me at the last conference.
Yeah. So for these, I really enjoy coming to these because you do have these types of conversations, right? The ones that we're having now. I think these are important to have in order to have takeaways. Sometimes I go to conferences and it kind of feels like you're just fishing for quotes. So you're just like, hey, what business do you have? But I think open and honest conversations about your security platforms, the troubles you're having, and having really no like hard feelings if you're not the right vendor for the user, right? We at Crowdstrike want to be the trusted security advisors, not sell you something you don't need. And that's really what a lot of my teammates echo as well. Right? If you come to me and say, hey, I need maybe application testing, right? Maybe Crowdstrike isn't the best bet for that, right? Maybe we just do monitoring. But we have partners in the space like, hey, maybe I can recommend you somewhere else for someone else to do. And that's, I think, how you actually walk away with something valuable and useful. Right, is having these conversations, being able to be vulnerable just a little bit about, you know, what you're sweeping under the rug, right? Not everyone's going to be able to do everything perfectly all the time, and that's okay, right? We need to work together in order to improve the security landscape and our own postures together.
If you can't trust people at a cybersecurity conference, who can you trust?
Right, exactly.
Right, because you said be vulnerable, and it's tough sometimes to be vulnerable, but in a space like this where security is so heightened, you've got to be able to trust everybody. Just to some nth degree, and that they're in it to help you. So networking, it sounds like, is what you're saying is the thing that we're solving. Yeah,
networking is a big key, but I also think that, you know, good specific trainings as well, right? I think I was talking to a fellow here. He went to the the quantum computing session, and those are really interesting because it talks about the oncoming of quantum decryption, right? The troubles it's going to pose to organizations and what it could possibly be, right? And be able to have that conversation, like, hey, yeah, like that's actually like a really big problem. Like, what are we going to do if that becomes a real thing? How are we going to approach encryption? And then having the ability to have like that little brainstorm with those people at the table really starts getting you thinking.
That's the best answer I've heard of that question. So thank you. Well done.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm glad I could give you some insight there.
Well, Dmitri, thanks so much for taking the time to come over.
Thanks for being with us.
Spend some time at the conference time with us. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. So again, many thanks to Scott and Dmitri for joining Paul and I at the Southeast Cyber Summit to discuss different cyber stuff and the tactical aspect to those particular cyber things. Paul and I will be back again in the near future with another episode of Tactical Cyber Podcast. I appreciate you downloading and listening. And if you are so inclined, please subscribe. Click all the buttons for the algorithmic crap. This particular podcast will also be broadcast on my other podcast, the Cyber Guy Podcast, where I do more long-form interviews with folks in the cyber world to talk about different cyber things that are important to them. Check that out, cyber spelled CYBUR. Thanks again. We will talk again soon.
Thank you for listening to the Tactical Cyber Podcast. Please note that the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of their respective employers. If you have thoughts, comments, or suggestions on the Tactical Cyber Podcast, email Darren at thecyberguy.com. You can also follow Darren and Paul on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/in/DarrenMott. or linkedin.com/in/Paul M. Perry CPA. Paul Perry is a member of Warren Averett CPAs and Advisors, where he leads the firm's risk advisory and assurance services team, a group dedicated to optimizing businesses' financial, operational, and technology controls so that organizations can make strategic choices for sustained growth. Learn more at warrenaverett.com. Stay safe, stay secure, and we'll see you next time.